So hopefully it's just a quick video today. I just want to show you how you can improve the analog synth in Ableton. I checked it out. I believe the original analog was introduced into Ableton around about 2008, where almost makes it a collector's item now. So it's been around for many years, but Ableton has expanded. We've got new filters, and using these filters and some other tricks, I've taken the oscillators, the raw oscillators from analog, and built a little rack that gives what I feel is a richer, nicer tone now. And anyway, I'll show you how it all works, and then if you're interested, how you can put this rack together for yourselves. So as I said in the intro, the object was to take the analog synth and make some improvements to it. What I've done is I've added the new auto filter, high pass and low pass. I've made some settings in analog, and I've put them all in a rack. One of the purposes being that, as I mentioned before, I like to use these little sort of mini instruments in push 3 on the Standalone, so that I just have these 16 controls. It's very simple. I don't have to think too much. I can just tweak things around and get musical results without getting into the weeds. So that's always one of my objectives when I build these little racks. So I've got some simple controls. We can switch the oscillator here. We can change the octaves. Same controls for oscillator 2. We can offset oscillator 2 if we want to. We have, if we're in the pulse width on oscillator 2, we can see it down here. We can adjust pulse width. We can turn off oscillator 1 actually completely by bringing it down to 0. So we can play with pulse width. We have the control over the filters, both low pass and here. Control over the high pass. We can switch the slope if we want. 24 decibel slope. We have control over our ADSR here. Simple stuff. So the amplitude envelope, and some simple modulation of the filter. Simple stuff. Really simple stuff. As I say, the purpose was to get a better tone from analog. And you might ask yourself, well, what do you mean by that? But if we have a listen to this, let's just go back, turn that one on. We'll set this to 0. Just reset this quickly. Okay. Well, this is the, you'll notice here I've restricted this. So I've tried to emulate a little bit the Jupiter 8 frequency response for the filter. So I've restricted this to a little bit of old school stuff again, to just over 7 kilohertz, so that we get those nice harmonics. Restrict the range, make it a little bit low to sort of more a bit of lo-fi, the older tone. But anyway, the point was, if we put up our resonance and we sweep the filter, we get here some very nice tones. We're using here on the low pass, I have the MS2 filter set up. I'm also using the MS2 on the high pass. I've restricted the amount of resonance. It doesn't go to a max, I believe it only goes to We'll get into this in the build, but I've restricted it here to 85%. So we have 85% resonance, and also, as I mentioned before, the frequency has been controlled. So we get these lovely tones. Now, you may say, well, I'm happy with analog, but let's just have a listen to what the filters sound like on analog now. So we'll just blend this out very quickly. And I have, on this channel here, I have the same patch, set up using, I've adjusted the filters, so if we're going to go up to about 7.1K, and the resonance is also restricted here to 85%, and you'll start to hear the tone of it's a lot more shrill. I hope not blowing people's ears here. It's not such a pleasant sound now. The filter technology has improved. So, as I say, with a little bit of rack building, we can improve the use of analog. That was the main objective. Anyway, we'll go back to the original rack now. As I say, I think you can hear that. A much more pleasant filter effect. Okay, so let me show you how to put this together. It's not too tricky. There's a few things we have to set up. Of course, you can no longer save these as analog presets. If you want to save any kind of preset you make, it's best to save it as a snapshot here. Just click it, set up your macros how you want them, click new, rename it, save your rack here. This will then be in your user library under presets. Always forget this. Let's have a look. Presets, instrument rack, and you would then have your rack there. You can drop it into any project. But as I say, you can't use presets here in analog because you obviously have the other filters attached. Okay, anyway, let's have a look how it's put together. So the first thing you're going to need then is an instrument rack, as always. Drag that and drop it in here. I've kept my original rack with the original names which I put in myself. You'll just have macro 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. Let's just expand this. We'll be using all of the 16 macros in the rack. As I say, these are my original names. They'll either be mapped from the instrument, or you can copy and, here we go, rename here. You can rename these to my names or choose whichever names you want, but this is just to speed things up a little bit. Then we're going to need analog. We'll drop that in here. And the two audio effects here, which are the new auto filter here. This is Ableton Live 12.2, I believe, was introduced. So we'll drop those in, the new auto filters. And then first of all, we'll set up our filters. This one, well, both of them actually we have on the MS2 model. This one here, which I'll rename, let's call this low pass. Rename this one as well so we know who's who. High pass. Okay, so this one here, I switched to the morph filter. I have a little bit of a technique with the morphing here and the resonance, which I'll show later on. Then we have here this one's MS2. This one we can leave on the high pass. Nothing to do there. Okay, so now we can make some settings in analog. So the first thing I did was I just increased this to -14 here. You couldn't play with this value for the levels, but I set it to -14. We don't need this filter here, so we can deactivate that filter. We'll be using these filters. And then it's just simply a case of mapping analog and the filters to the rack. So we have oscillator 1, we go in here, oscillator 1 is the shape of oscillator 1. Then we have the octave for oscillator 1, oscillator 2 shape here, oscillator 2 octave here, oscillator 2 semitone, and then the pulse width, which we will find here. We'll map that one here. Then we have the low pass frequency. Well, actually, we'll stick with the analog to begin with. We can go here to the amp and we'll map the attack here, the decay, sustain, and release here. We will then go to our filter LFO, which is taken here from the auto filter low pass. So we'll take the LFO amount. Actually, we can close analog for a second. And the rate here. Now I've kept it in hertz so that you can get some very slow filter modulation. You could switch this to synced if you want, that's your choice. Then we need to map a few things here. We need, of course, to map the low pass frequency here, the low pass resonance here, and I've also mapped the morph here to the low pass resonance. And basically, when we increase the resonance, I just want to adapt the filter a little bit away from low pass towards high pass, just a small amount, so that we cut off some of the bottom end a little bit. It's just a tweak. As I say, one of my objectives with this was to make it a bit of an old school synth, sort of Jupiter 8 style. So quite a few of the settings here are based around that. Okay, so that one I believe is set up. Oh no, we need the slope here. We need to be able to switch the slope. That's this filter set up now. Let's just map the frequency here of the high pass. And we don't actually map the resonance on this one. It's just purely a filter, just cut off the bottom end. So this is just a very simple filter. We're not even changing the states here or using resonance or the LFO. So most of the work is based on this one, the low pass. Okay, so we can go back to analog now. I think we have pretty much everything. Let's just have a look. Yes, there's something else we need to do on oscillator 1. We need to map this sub-level. So we're going to map this sub-level here from oscillator 1 also to the low pass resonance. And we do that as well for oscillator 2. We'll take that one as well and map that to the low pass resonance. Just a little trick I'll show you. So as we play with the resonance, we're going to reduce the bass a little bit. We also need to map here with oscillator 1 the pulse width of oscillator 1 as well. We'll map that to the pulse width. I forgot that one. Then finally we need to map these buttons here. This one, oscillator 1 on off, we're going to map here. And oscillator 2, this one here, on off, we will map here. That gives us a possibility then. We'll set up the constraints here. I'll put a screenshot up in a second. You can just punch in the numbers. That allows us to turn these oscillators off if we want. Okay, so that's everything mapped. As I say, now I'll put up a screenshot very quickly. You can pause the video, punch in these numbers. So I'll see you once you put them in. As I guess you've seen, I've made quite a few changes to things like the filter frequency here. We have a little bit of high pass, not a maximum high pass. I've restricted the low pass. We also have a very slow LFO down to 40 Hertz. I've adjusted here the settings for the amp for the attack, decay, sustain, release. as I mentioned, I wanted to base this loosely around the Jupiter 8. I've got the Arturia Jupiter 8, and I've kind of like tweaked it to match that a little bit with envelope times, and also the selection here of oscillator shapes that are possible: sine to noise, saw to rectangle. So I made some little tweaks. The trick with the low pass resonance here I mentioned before. Okay, so let's see, that should now work. Hopefully, if everything's punched in. As I say, you have to use snapshots here. I've got a snapshot here. You have to use snapshots. Once you set your macros, you can then create a new one. You can even randomize your values here. Let's see what happens. Well, not a lot. Something must be wrong. Let me just check very quickly. Sorry, my mistake here. That should have been set to high pass, of course. Sorry, my mistake there. So just make sure you make that setting. Okay, what do we have here? Make sure everything works. Okay, looks good. As always, I hope this has been useful to somebody. Make use of it. Get some more life out of analog. Thanks for watching anyway. Take care and see you in the next one.